Wait, Joye, thank you for joining us on the Life After Ministry podcast. Excited to have you here.
Thank you so much, Matt. It's an honor to be here.
My wife told me about what you have going on, and she said, I think you need to read this book. And I said, what's the book called? And she said, This Dream Is Not For You. And I said, I have so many things going on. I'm all like, well, which dream is she talking about? And what thing does she want me to stop in this moment? And really, it wasn't about anything that is going on currently, at least that I know of. But it was really, as I jumped into what you have going on, it was really a look back on my life, that there were some doors that were closed for me in this life after ministry. But take us a little bit into your journey and your story of how you got to this point and what led you to write the book.
Yeah. It's funny that the title, This Dream Is Not For You, it's not one of those that when you hand it to somebody, it feels like you're trying to send them a message.
Right.
But no, for me, it's This Dream Is Not For You really tells the story of this 15-year period that I had while serving at Elevation Church as the worship pastor from 2007 to 2021. And the Lord had me on a ministry journey where I was having to wrestle with certain dreams that I had that looked like they were about to be brought to life, but then some unexpected detours along the way that I can get into. And then also some family dreams that we had with our three daughters who all had different special needs when they were born. And I guess just for the purposes of this podcast, I'll focus more on the ministry side of things. But my dream had always been to be a worship leader. And growing up, I was in all these different Christian bands and, just really wanted to serve the Lord in that way. And so when I was brought on staff with a guy named Chris Brown, who's still at Elevation, and a guy named Mac Brock, who served for about 10 years. The three of us were asked to help build what became Elevation Worship in 2007. And for the first 7 or so years of my time at Elevation, I was getting to live my dream. I was able to help pastor the team, to write songs, to record on albums, to do all these amazing things. And then I tell the story in the book, and this is kind of what even kicks off the book. About 7 years into it, there was a Tuesday afternoon programming meeting that we had. And Pastor Stephen asked me to stay after the meeting, which is never a good sign to be asked by the boss to stay after. And he basically said he wanted to show or give me a picture of what he saw for my future at the church. And he said, Chris and Mac, they're amazing worship leaders and vocalists and songwriters, and they have this anointing to do what they do. And he said, I think you are good at those things, but you have a lid. But what I see in you is the gifting to be a great teacher and pastor and leader. And so one day you're going to have to decide, are you willing to let go of what you're good at in order to take hold of what God's called you to be great at? And he wasn't asking me to make any immediate changes, but he was trying to paint this picture of you're going to have to let go of some things if you're going to want to continue to serve in this ministry. And I remember everything in me just wanting to fight back against that of like, you don't know my gifting, you don't know my anointing, all the things. But I also knew that God places leaders over us for a reason. And so I needed to weigh his words carefully. And so I drove home from that Tuesday meeting, just kind of in a daze, having a pity party. I remember getting home, not really talking to my wife, not talking to my kids, going straight upstairs. And I'm sitting at the foot of my bed, and I'm just in my own head, feeling sorry for myself. And finally, after about 10 or 15 minutes of that, I look at my Bible that was open to where I'd read it that morning. And it was open to the story of when David had wanted to build the temple. And Nathan had come back to him and said, no, this dream is not for you. It's for your son, Solomon. And while I wasn't trying to compare myself to David by any means in that moment, I felt like the Lord just asked me, are you willing to trust me with your dream and take a different seat in the dream than you initially thought you would play, and let me build something bigger that I wanted to build that's not centered around you. And I wish I could tell you everything changed for me in that moment, that I felt happy about that conversation with Pastor Stephen and excited about that new season. But it took years to work that out in me, of realizing that I'd built my whole identity around worship leading and around songwriting. And it wasn't until I was able to let that go that I was able to see, number one, my identity should never be built in what I did in the first place, but God began to birth new dreams in me. And so the last 7 years on staff at Elevation, I started to have to walk in new gifts of preaching and writing and leading. And that's, continued in the last 2 years, where I stepped away out of full-time vocational ministry into more new dreams. But none of that would ever happen if I hadn't been willing to let go of the dream that I thought defined me for 20 years. I always thought I'd be a worship leader until the end. And then at Elevation, I thought I'd be on staff at Elevation until the end, until God asked me to let that go. And so I think life is so much about saying, I have this one picture in my mind, but am I willing to trust God with the picture and the story that He's writing more than the one that I wanted to write myself?
What was it like initially as Pastor Stephen is talking to you and giving you the message from the Lord, perhaps? But what kind of relationship? Was there a trust there already established to where you felt like you could receive that, or did this just come out of the blue, and it was, this is not a job performance or kind of your annual checkup, but what was that relationship like to where you could actually receive that from Him?
Yeah, I worked really closely alongside of him on the leadership team, and we were friends too. I mean, ultimately, he was my boss and my leader and my pastor, but there was a trust there, and I really did believe that he wasn't trying to punish me or trying to hurt me. Like he ultimately wanted what was best for the church and the team, but I also believed he wanted what was best for me, and he wanted me to find what I could ultimately thrive in. Now, I didn't necessarily feel that way in the moment of that conversation, like I said, but once I stepped back, I was able to look at the trajectory of our relationship and the trajectory of his leadership in my life and say, okay, if I trust him, and I trust that ultimately the Lord has placed him as a leader in my life, and I'm called here to this church, then I need to be able to trust that God is working something out in me, and that this isn't just the whim of a man. This is something that God's trying to form in me. And so the more I could go back to that place, the easier it was for me to walk through that transition over the next couple of years.
And He gave you a pretty long line of preparation. It wasn't like, hey, this is happening in 2 weeks. So
right.
Did that make you feel like you wanted to withdraw from that? We get to talk to a lot of people within pastoral transitions that are being told that this thing that they thought they were really good at, that they were called to by God, the reason they got into ministry to begin with, I feel led to preach. I've been told, it's almost, in some cases, it's like the American Idol tryout, where somebody's been told by their family their whole life they're a fantastic singer, and then they get on and, Simon Cowell saying, no, you're awful. Like, this is not good. And not that you're like that and most people are like that, but that kind of blindsided wake up call to, like, actually you might be built for something differently. You had some time and space to be able to think through that. How helpful was that for you, and how truthful do you have to be with yourself in the process of all of that?
Yeah, it was. That was an incredible gift that he gave me, of helping me come to terms with this on my own. And that's not always possible in every leadership situation, but I'm grateful that he was able to see something in me and point the way and say, hey, this is where we're going, and I want you to be able to get there yourself. And I think sometimes as leaders, we don't have those conversations with the people we lead early enough. And so they are blindsided. And so while in a sense I was surprised by that conversation, it was more of, hey, this is the beginning of a journey that I want to walk with you. This isn't the end right now. And so it helped me over the next couple of years to really do a lot of wrestling with God and, be honest and self-aware that, oh yeah, they actually are better at this. The people on the team, whether it's Chris or Mac or the new people that we're trying to hire, they were more gifted at certain things than I was. And then I was able to look in and say, okay, well, what am I truly built for? And once I could own that, it gave me so much freedom to say, okay, I'm not going to try to win at a game that I can't win at. Let me actually win at what God's gifted me to do. And that brought so much freedom in the end. And once I started to experience some of that, I was able to start to find more joy in watching the people on the team do the things that I used to wish I could do and thought I could never live without. And I was able to find satisfaction in watching them do it because I was starting to realize that God had me on a different path. And you talked about calling. I think sometimes we take what we like to do and enjoy doing, and we say that we're called to do it. And that might be a specific assignment for you in this season. But I think calling typically in the New Testament has much more to do with who we are to be in Jesus and what God is forming within us. And yes, there are certain callings that you see are assignments that come out of the blue in the New Testament for somebody like Paul. But most of the times those are surprises, not career plans. Mm-hmm. And so what helped me is to think less about, oh, I'm called to be a worship leader. I'm called to be a songwriter. I'm called to be a pastor. It was more like, okay, this is my assignment for this season, but I'm called to follow Jesus. I'm called to make disciples. I'm called to be a husband. I'm called to be a father. And I can do that and live at that purpose no matter what my job description looks like, no matter whether or not I'm working at a church or I'm working on my own or I'm working in the business world. And so it helped me start to think of calling in a slightly different way that I write about a lot in the book. And that's been a helpful frame for me.
Yeah, Brad Lomenick, and something that we talk about a lot is he puts out this framework of identity, assignment, and calling. And I think in ministry, it gets really difficult for us at times to be able to discern which one is which. If you asked me, 10 years ago, I would have said that I am a pastor and that is my calling. And then on the other side of it, you look back and you say, actually, it probably was more of an assignment for that season, and that God has a calling on my life that he wants me to be open to. You really, for a lot of other people would look at you and what you had accomplished. You're at one of the largest churches in America. You're writing songs that are not only being sung there locally, just there at your church, but the global church is singing this, not just even in America, but on other continents and other places, and songs that have spoken to me in certain seasons. But for, so a lot of people look at that and say, well, what? Don't complain, dude. You've already accomplished so much. How is that journey between you and the Lord? And feels like maybe the rug has been pulled out from underneath you, and like, well, what now, Lord? Like, what am I supposed to do? And even can you settle into what He has for you now and trust that? Okay, well, you're not that old. Like, how do you do this? Like, is this what I'm supposed to do? Is this the dream that you have for me for the next 40 years of my life? How do we settle into that and that process with the Lord? What did that conversation sound like?
Part of that process in praying through while I was at Elevation, in terms of, that conversation happened probably on the front end right before Elevation Worship became what it is today. And so it's easy to think you sing the songs that you're talking about, you see the team on tour, and a lot of people think it's always been like that. It was not always like that. It was a long road of building that and writing songs for our church, and really focusing for the first decade on let's just create a worship culture at our church before trying to export that outside of it. And so this conversation happened right as things were starting to shift. And so for me, that was like, oh, the thing that I've been working towards and trying to build, and we're almost there, then I had to take a different seat. So yeah, what that did for me was it exposed a lot of pride. It exposed a lot of the fact that I was at the center of my own dream. And so I think God had to take me on a very painful but important journey of becoming more self-aware to just the selfish ambition I had in my heart. And so I think I don't want to skip over that, because I think a lot of times we have to be honest with what we really want and why we want it. And are we willing to actually do the work of repentance and honesty before God so that he can then form his desires within us? So that was, like I said, that was a painful process to walk through, but a really healthy one. And I realized my whole journey, I've always wanted to feel like I was doing something special for God. Ever since my granddad was a pastor, like that's an internal driver for me. And for God to help me realize that I'd almost made that into an idol, and that I didn't always have to perform or to do something that I deemed was special. I needed to really find my worth and significance in who Christ was in my life and what he was calling me to in my day to day. And so I think I had to get a lot of that stuff right and centered before I could really discern, okay, well, what's next, God? Because I didn't want to be chasing after the wrong thing or validation. And so when I actually stepped off staff at Elevation, that was a whole new process for me of, at the beginning of 2021, I felt like we had written the rest of our story. Like we were going to be at Elevation to the end. And my wife and I started getting really, really restless, feeling like God was saying, okay, did you write the rest of your story? Or are you willing to give me the pen again? And so we were scared because we loved everybody at the church. It's all we'd ever known. I mean, for the past 15 years, we have 3 kids with different types of health needs. So health insurance, stability, all that stuff was important to us. So we prayed about it for about a year. And plus I knew that over the course of praying, once again, I had to confront am I willing to step away from something that feels so special, that feels like God is moving and he's doing this work that's influencing people all over the world. And I had to confront this voice of the enemy inside of me that said, you step away from this and you're not going to be important anymore. So I had to pray through all of that and really come to terms with what I'm a part of is not what gives my life worth or significance. And, God sent us a lot of different prophetic words from people who didn't know that we were wrestling with this. And I remember it was the fall of 2021. I was standing in the middle of an arena on the Elevation Nights tour. They were singing those songs that you're talking about. And I felt like the Lord said, your assignment here is done. I've got something else for you to do. And there's somebody else who needs to come and do and take this ministry where you can't take it. So sometimes we think our transition is just about us, but a lot of times it's also about creating space for what God wants to do through someone else. And so, I didn't know what the next season was going to look like, but my wife and I were on the same page that we had prayed about it. We'd fasted about it. We'd gotten counsel, and we had to step into the unknown. And that was scary, but it's been 2 years and God has been so faithful and so kind. And I would say that we are in an extremely healthy and joy-filled place, even though I still 2 years in still wrestle with FOMO. Like I see the team out doing amazing things. I'm like, oh, I used to be part of that. Or you're confronted with things keep going and they keep growing and you realize, oh, I guess I wasn't as important as I thought I was.
Yeah.
Which that is a healthy thing too, to realize that we're just playing a part in what God is doing, but it doesn't all depend on us. And that's so freeing that you don't have to carry this weight of fixing everything and being everybody's savior. You just come in and do the assignment God has for you. And there's so much joy in that. So just to go back to your question, because that was a long answer, I think you can't make these kind of decisions and go through this kind of process, number one, without a deep prayer life and really like learning how to be still and silent and listen to God. I think you have to have really trusted voices in your life that are speaking into you, because we all have blind spots. And I push back a little bit on when people say you always have to have a peace about something before you make a decision.
Mm.
I understand that there is a peace that passes all understanding. But even when we were confident that God was calling us to take this step, I still think we were about maybe 80% sure, which is about the highest level of certainty I get. And before I went in to have the conversation with Chunks, the CFO at Elevation, who was my boss, I was terrified. Like, I felt like this is what God was calling us to do, but the peace didn't come until after we took the step. And so I think sometimes we don't follow God into what the next assignment is because we're waiting on a feeling that doesn't come until after you make that decision.
Wow. Yeah, one of the things that you say is there's true peace and fulfillment only on the other side of releasing your grip on your dreams and trusting God with your whole life. And I think that what we want is a guarantee that before we take that step, that we're actually going to have that true peace and that true fulfillment. And he wants us to really step into that and say, I want you to look back and I'll show you.
Yeah.
But even a couple years in, it's not like it's you wake up every single day and you have total assurance and total peace, even still today. Or would you say that it's all rainbows and teddy bears?
Definitely not rainbows and teddy bears.
Okay.
No, I mean, it's, I mentioned it's been an amazing journey because of what we've been able to experience as a family. But a lot of that has come through freak out moments too of, okay, God, we don't have a steady paycheck anymore. How are you going to provide? We're building this new business and this new ministry. And there are days where I feel like, oh man, everything's working. And then the next day I feel like nothing's working.
Yeah.
And I would say that 2 years in, I'm able to look back and be like, well, look at how God's provided. And we're able to celebrate that as a family. And so we're writing a new story with God, which that's the joy-filled part. And I'm learning more and more. It's funny, I write a book called This Dream Is Not For You. And I feel like I'm having to relearn everything I wrote in the book because I have all these new dreams and I'm having to be like, well, I want to hold on to these. But I'm having to still trust and open my hands to God. Like even that book is a dream. And going through a process of, okay, am I going to trust God with this book, even if it doesn't do everything that I want it to do or think it will do? And so I'm going through all those same struggles. I feel like we circle the same issues and the same struggles over and over and over again in our life, but hopefully we're circling them at higher altitudes and we're able to pivot from, I talk in the book about striving versus surrender. Yeah. I still find myself in striving mode all the time, trying to prove myself or trying to make something work. But what I'm learning is how in my prayer time to say, okay, God, I recognize that I'm striving. Help me to trust you with this. And the quicker I'm able to recognize something and turn it back over to the Lord, I think that's where the battle is won. It's not in eradicating those struggles. It's recognizing them and bringing them to God quickly. So yeah, even like recently, I would say the end of last year, the end of 2023, there were about 2 months there that were really tough, where it felt like all the invitations were drying up and all the coaching was drying up. And a friend of mine just said, hey, I feel like the Lord right now wants to teach you how to pray in this season and to really depend on him. And that wasn't a fun process of saying, okay, God, I thought I knew how to pray. What is the new thing you're trying to teach me right now? But I felt like the Lord was really trying to teach me to really look to him as my security and my dependence, and not to how many people are calling me or booking me or wanting to validate me through an invitation to do a podcast or something like that. And going through that process, then this year, I feel like the Lord has given me new vision for different things, and people are calling again. And it feels like the Lord on the other side of that time has really given this ministry or my ministry a new focus. And so I think that all those times are gifts. The seasons of plenty and the seasons of want are gifts because God is always forming something in us through those, even though I don't like those seasons. But I'm grateful for them on the other side.
Yeah, you find that it's kind of, when you run your own show, it's a little bit of feast and famine, and never had to depend on the Lord in such a unique way as you do on this side of things. I totally get that. What is it that you're doing these days? You wrote a book, so everybody knows that when you write a book as a Christian author, that you're instantly a millionaire. But beyond that, tell us about your ministry today, and if somebody wants to be connected to what you're doing, and obviously to get the book, and we'll put all the links in the show notes. But tell us what life looks like today.
Yeah. So the first couple years, like I said, after stepping away from staff, and we still attend the church. That's a good thing to note. Like, we go to the Blakeney campus. Our families are really connected there. Most of my best friends are still part of the church. And so that's been a really healthy thing. It can also be awkward sometimes, where you're seeing the thing that you walked away from in front of you every single weekend.
Totally.
But once again, that's a good formation process. But right now, I've spent most of my time coaching worship leaders and worship teams, and then traveling to preach at places. And I have a podcast called Dreamers and Disciples. In this season, though, I've really felt like the Lord has given me a passion as I've started to coach some pastors and even Christians who lead in the corporate world. My passion right now is to help Christians with a public platform really develop a private life that empowers that platform. So I feel like it's so easy to focus on how we lead, the people that we're leading, the projects that we're trying to bring about, but we don't pay enough attention to our inner world. And, I see so many Christians who are in leadership discouraged and weary and anxious. And sometimes we think we have to change our surroundings to fix that, when really we need to take ownership of our own inner world and our soul and our spirit and our health. And so I am really, really passionate about that right now. I have a whole new mentorship program called the Joyful Leader, which really aims to help people form joy in their life, in their marriages, in their families, in their walk with God, so that they can then in turn be a better leader in whatever sphere of influence God has assigned them to in the moment. And so I still I still work with worship leaders and pastors, but I'm also starting to work with just any leader who felt like, oh, I thought a measure of success was going to bring me joy and it didn't. Why not? Because that can be a scary and confusing place to be. Because I remember there was one time a couple of years ago when I sat in my office and I'm looking around at all the gold records and stuff on the walls from Elevation. And it was all the things that I thought would bring me joy. And I realized I felt really empty in that moment. And that was a catalyst for me to go on this whole new journey of prayer, of contemplative, like spiritual practices like silence and solitude. It helped me even like, I've got to be more disciplined about what I eat and my exercise and all these things that we think we're a compartmentalized person, but we're all one. Like what you do physically affects your soul. What you do at home affects how you lead in the office. You can't separate yourself. And so right now, I am trying to help leaders become a healthier, whole version of themselves.
I love that. There's just a sense that these plans that God has led us to were not our plans whatsoever. And that, I think of Isaiah 40 says, it is he who sits above the vault or the circle of this earth, and we, the inhabitants, are like grasshoppers. And somehow he sees everything from the beginning to the end. And, my prayer is always, Lord, just help me stay on the right path. I don't know what the next step is, and we're not guaranteed tomorrow or even next year, but I just wanted to say thank you for your ministry. Your book has spoken to me. If you've ever been in a place, and for the people who are listening, likely you're listening because the dream that you had for yourself might not have, you might not be in a place where that's being fulfilled, or it might have just been taken from you, and you're scratching your head trying to figure out why. And that's where I think that this book really hit me, even years later, after my transition and figuring it out, and even looking at the road ahead. Like, God, what is it that you have for me? Is to be able to release my grip on what I think that I control, and realize that He really owns it all, and He wants to do something far greater than even what I can think or imagine. So, Wade, thanks for sharing your story. We appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you for having me on, and just want to encourage anyone listen. There is joy on the other side of whatever you're having to let go of.
That's good. Thank you. Thanks for listening to another episode of the Life After Ministry podcast. Our mission is to help you navigate the complexities, the joys, and sometimes even the beautiful moments of life after ministry. Whether you're a ministry leader thinking about a transition or a stakeholder in the decision-making process, we hope these conversations bring you both clarity and comfort. And we believe that any transition can really be a gateway to transformation, and that there's not just life after ministry, but there's also ministry after ministry. If you found value in today's episode, consider subscribing to this podcast, and don't hesitate to share it with anyone that you think might benefit. The journey is sacred, and we're committed to walking alongside you, providing resources, encouragement, and a community where stories are heard and valued. And until next time, keep leaning into these opportunities, these transitions, these transformations, and the challenges that come with life after ministry.